Maxwell Stone stood frozen at the altar, his heart pounding wildly in his chest. The room was silent, filled with hundreds of guests, all waiting for his reaction. The bride standing before him was not what he had expected. The woman his parents had arranged for him to marry was covered in a thick veil, but he could see through the thin material that her skin was much darker than the photos he had been shown. His parents had lied to him. They had shown him pictures of a different woman entirely. "What is this?" he whispered, his voice barely audible to anyone but the bride. The woman remained still, her hands clutching a bouquet of white roses so tightly that her knuckles turned pale. The wedding planner, sensing tension, quickly ushered the guests to begin the ceremony. Music again, trying to cover the awkward moment. Maxwell's father, Richard Stone, a stern man who had built their family empire from nothing, gave his son a hard stare from the front row. The message was clear: go through with this or face the consequences. The business merger with the bride's family company was worth billions, and backing out now would cost the Stone empire everything. Maxwell had always followed his father's orders. At 35 years old, he had spent his entire life building the family business, sacrificing his own dreams and desires to meet his father's expectations. He had dated women his father approved of, attended universities his father selected, and now he was expected to marry a woman he had never truly met, a woman whose identity had been hidden from him until this very moment. The minister cleared his throat, bringing Maxwell back to reality. The ceremony had to continue. Guests were watching, business partners were present, and the press would have a field day if the billionaire left his bride at the altar. "Are you ready to proceed?" the minister asked quietly. Maxwell nodded stiffly, feeling trapped. He couldn't believe his parents would go this far. They had always been controlling, but this was beyond anything he had expected. They had shown him photos of a light-skinned woman with European features, claiming she was Amara Johnson, daughter of tech mogul William Johnson. The merger between Stone Industries and Johnson Tech would create the largest technology conglomerate in the world. As the ceremony continued, Maxwell barely heard the words being spoken. His mind raced with confusion and anger. Why would his parents deceive him? Why would the Johnson family agree to this charade? None of it made sense. When the time came to say his vows, Maxwell spoke automatically, his voice hollow. The bride's voice was soft and trembling as she repeated her vows. There was something in her tone that caught his attention, a hint of sadness or resignation that mirrored his own feelings. After they exchanged rings, the minister announced, "You may now kiss the bride." This was the moment Maxwell had been dreading. He would have to lift her veil and face the reality of the woman he had just married. His hands shook slightly as he reached for the heavy material. The room seemed to hold its collective breath as he slowly lifted the veil. What he saw made him gasp. The woman before him had beautiful dark skin, yes, but that wasn't what shocked him. It was her eyes, large, expressive eyes filled with unshed tears. Eyes that seemed to apologize for something that wasn't her fault. She was not ugly as his superficial first reaction had led him to believe. She was simply not who he had been told he was marrying. "I'm sorry," she whispered, so quietly that only he could hear. Before Maxwell could respond, his father stepped forward, clapping loudly and signaling for everyone to celebrate. The guests, oblivious to the deception, cheered as music filled the room again. Maxwell placed a quick, formal kiss on his new wife's cheek, then took her hand and led her down the aisle. The reception was a blur of fake smiles and hollow congratulations. Maxwell kept his new bride close, not out of affection but because he was determined to get answers. When they finally had a moment alone, he turned to her. "Who are you?" "Really?" he asked, trying to keep his voice calm. "I am Amara Johnson," she replied softly. "The real Amara Johnson." "Then who was the woman in the photos they showed me?" "A model, I assume." "My father thought you wouldn't agree to the marriage if you knew what I really looked like." She looked down at her hands. "I told him it was wrong to deceive you, but he insisted this was the only way to ensure the merger went through." Maxwell ran a hand through his hair in frustration. "This is insane. They married us under false pretenses." "I understand if you want an annulment," Amara said, her voice surprisingly steady. "I didn't want this either. My father gave me no choice." For the first time, Maxwell really looked at the woman he had just married. Behind the initial shock, he could see that she was actually quite beautiful, with high cheekbones, full lips, and those incredible eyes that seemed to hold a world of intelligence and strength. "No," Maxwell said, surprising himself. "No annulment yet. First, I want to understand exactly what's going on and why our families thought they needed to trick us." As the reception continued around them, Maxwell and Amara made a pact. They would pretend to be the happy newlyweds for the evening, but afterward, they would get to the bottom of their parents' deception, together. Little did Maxwell know that this arrangement, begun in lies and manipulation, would change his life in ways he could never have imagined. The grand ballroom of the Stone estate sparkled with crystal chandeliers and the flash of expensive jewelry as guests danced and celebrated. Maxwell and Amara moved through the crowd like perfect actors in a play, smiling, thanking guests for their presence, and even sharing a choreographed first dance. To everyone watching, they appeared to be the perfect couple, the handsome billionaire and his exotic bride. But beneath the surface, both were burning with questions and barely contained anger directed at their manipulative parents. Richard Stone and William Johnson sat together at the head table, looking pleased with themselves as they discussed future business plans. They occasionally glanced at their children with satisfied smiles, completely unaware that their deception had been uncovered. "They look so proud of themselves," Amara whispered as she and Maxwell waltzed past the head table. "They won't be for long," Maxwell replied, his hand firm on her waist. "My father always thinks he can control everything and everyone. This time he's gone too far." As the evening wore on, Maxwell found himself studying his new wife with increasing curiosity. Despite the circumstances, she carried herself with remarkable dignity. She was well-spoken when addressing guests, knowledgeable when discussing business with his associates, and showed no signs of the timidity he had initially perceived at the altar. "You work at Johnson Tech?" he asked during a brief moment alone. Amara nodded. "I'm the head of product development. I have degrees in electrical engineering and computer science from MIT." This surprised Maxwell. His father had described Amara as the Johnson girl, with no mention of her professional accomplishments. "Why didn't they tell me that? My father made it sound like you were just William's daughter, not an actual executive." A flash of hurt crossed Amara's face before she composed herself. "Because to men like our fathers, that's all I am. A bargaining chip. My actual abilities are irrelevant to them." Maxwell felt a twinge of shame. Hadn't he initially judged her based solely on her appearance? Wasn't he guilty of the same superficial assessment? By midnight, the guests began to depart, leaving congratulatory wishes and expensive gifts behind. As the last car pulled away from the estate, Maxwell's mother, Eleanor Stone, approached the newlyweds with a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. "We've prepared the East Wing master suite for you both," she said, her voice dripping with false sweetness. "Everything you need for your first night as husband and wife." Maxwell felt Amara tense beside him. The implication was clear. Their families expected the marriage to be consummated. The merger papers included clauses about producing an heir within the first few years of marriage. "Thank you, Mother," Maxwell said stiffly. "We're both quite tired from the day's events." Once they were alone in the massive suite, with its king-sized bed and rose petals scattered across the silk sheets, the awkwardness between them became palpable. "I'll sleep on the couch," Maxwell said immediately, grabbing a pillow from the bed. "That's not necessary," Amara replied. "The bed is large enough. We can share it without, well, you know." Maxwell hesitated, then nodded. "All right. But first I think we need to talk about what happens next." They sat on opposite ends of a plush sofa near the fireplace, both still in their wedding attire. Amara carefully removed her veil and the elaborate headpiece, revealing a crown of natural curls that had been pinned up for the ceremony. "I knew something was wrong when my father insisted I wear this heavy veil," she said, setting the material aside. "Now I understand why. He wanted to hide me from you until the last possible moment." "Did you know about the fake photos?" Maxwell asked. Amara shook her head. "No. I had no idea they were showing you pictures of someone else. I thought." She paused, looking embarrassed. "I thought you had agreed to marry me knowing what I looked like. Finding out about the deception explains your reaction at the altar." Maxwell winced. "I'm sorry about that. It wasn't about your race or appearance. It was the shock of realizing I'd been lied to." "But you were disappointed," Amara said matter-of-factly. "Don't deny it. I saw your face." Maxwell couldn't lie. "I was surprised. And yes, confused about why they would lie. But now that I've had time to process everything." He looked at her directly. "I'm more angry about being manipulated than anything else." Amara nodded slowly. "So what do we do now?" "An annulment would devastate both companies. The merger is already underway." "I know," Maxwell sighed. "And my father made sure our personal finances are now completely entangled as well. Breaking this marriage would be financially catastrophic for both of us." They sat in silence for a moment, contemplating their limited options. "What if," Amara finally said, "we stay married but only on paper? We could live separate lives while maintaining the appearance of a union for business purposes. Maxwell considered this. A marriage of convenience. Exactly. We could set a timeline, maybe 2 years. That would give us enough time to subtly separate our finances and prepare for an eventual divorce that wouldn't tank the companies. It was a practical solution, one that appealed to Maxwell's business sense. Yet for some reason, looking at Amara now, intelligent, composed, and undeniably beautiful in her own right, the idea of a purely business arrangement felt somewhat disappointing. 2 years, he agreed. We'll need to live together at least part of the time to keep up appearances. I can continue my work at Johnson Tech, Amara added. And you'll run Stone Industries. We'll be like roommates who occasionally attend functions together. Maxwell nodded. And during that time, we'll work together to gradually take control away from our fathers. They've proven they can't be trusted with power. A small smile appeared on Amara's lips. I like the way you think, Mr. Stone. Please call me Maxwell, he said, returning her smile. Or Max. We are married after all. Max, she tested the name. And I'm Amara. They shook hands, sealing their new agreement. It wasn't the wedding night either of them had envisioned, but in that moment, a seed of mutual respect was planted, one that would grow in ways neither of them could anticipate. As they prepared for bed, each on their respective side with a wall of pillows between them, Maxwell found himself thinking that perhaps this arrangement wouldn't be as terrible as he had initially feared. Amara Johnson was clearly intelligent and resilient. If they were going to be partners in this unusual situation, he could have done far worse. What he didn't know was that Amara was having similar thoughts as she drifted off to sleep beside him, wondering if perhaps fate had dealt them an unusual hand for a reason. The morning after the wedding dawned bright and clear. Maxwell woke first, momentarily confused by the weight on the other side of the bed. The events of the previous day came rushing back as he turned to see Amara still asleep, the wall of pillows between them partially collapsed during the night. In sleep, her face was relaxed, free from the tension and careful composure she had maintained throughout the wedding. Maxwell found himself studying her features, the long eyelashes resting against her cheeks, the full lips slightly parted, the smooth dark skin that seemed to glow in the morning light. She was beautiful, he realized, in a way that was entirely her own. He slipped quietly from the bed, not wanting to wake her, and went to shower and dress. By the time he returned to the bedroom, Amara was sitting up, checking her phone with a frown. Good morning, Maxwell said, adjusting his tie. Everything okay? Amara looked up, her expression troubled. Just messages from my father. He wants to meet for breakfast to discuss the future of our companies. As if yesterday wasn't enough manipulation for one weekend. Maxwell checked his own phone and found similar messages from his father. Mine too. They're probably expecting us to come down looking like blissful newlyweds. Should we confront them about the deception? Amara asked, running a hand through her curls. Maxwell considered this for a moment. Not yet. If we show our hand too early, they might find some way to regain control. For now, let's play along and gather information. We need to understand exactly how this merger is structured before we make any moves. Amara nodded in agreement. You're right. Besides, I'd rather not have that confrontation before I've had coffee. This drew a genuine laugh from Maxwell, his first since the wedding began. A woman after my own heart. The kitchen here makes excellent coffee. I'll show you where everything is. As they made their way through the massive stone estate, Maxwell gave Amara an impromptu tour. The mansion had been in his family for 3 generations, a testament to the Stone legacy of wealth and power. Yet as he showed her around, he realized how empty the place had always felt to him, more like a museum than a home. This place is beautiful, Amara commented as they passed through a gallery lined with expensive artwork, but it doesn't feel lived in. Maxwell was surprised by her perception. That's exactly how I've always felt about it. My mother is more concerned with appearances than comfort. Where would you live if you could choose? Amara asked, genuinely curious. The question caught Maxwell off guard. No one had ever asked him that before. I have a small cabin in the mountains about 2 hours from here. Nothing fancy, just 3 bedrooms and a great view. I go there when I need to escape and think clearly. It sounds lovely, Amara said with a smile. I have a little apartment in the city that I love. My father hates that I won't live in the family mansion, but I needed my own space. They reached the kitchen where staff were already preparing breakfast. The head chef greeted Maxwell warmly and welcomed Amara to the family with a kind smile that seemed more genuine than anything they'd received from their actual families. Over coffee, they continued their conversation, discovering they had more in common than either had expected. Both had studied engineering, though Maxwell had been forced to focus on business administration afterward. Both enjoyed hiking in the outdoors. Both felt the weight of family expectations that had shaped their lives in ways they hadn't always wanted. "I never wanted to be in the family business," Maxwell admitted. "I wanted to design buildings, not own them." "Architecture?" Amara asked with interest. Maxwell nodded. "I have notebooks full of designs that will never be built." "What about you? Did you always want to work in tech?" "Actually, yes," Amara said. "But on my own terms. My father wanted me in the business side, handling investor relations and being the face of diversity for the company." She made air quotes around the word face. "I had to fight to be taken seriously as an engineer. Even now, with all my patents and successes, he introduces me as my daughter rather than our head of product development." Maxwell frowned. "That must be incredibly frustrating." "It is," she agreed. "But I've learned to pick my battles. And I've built a team at Johnson Tech that respects me for my mind, not my family name." Their conversation was interrupted by the arrival of their parents. Richard and Eleanor Stone entered first, followed closely by William Johnson. The three of them looked pleased, like cats who had caught particularly fat canaries. "There's the happy couple," Richard boomed, his voice echoing in the large kitchen. "I trust you had a pleasant evening?" Maxwell felt Amara's hand find his under the table, a silent signal of solidarity. He squeezed her fingers gently in acknowledgement. "We had a lot to talk about," Maxwell replied smoothly. "Getting to know your spouse is important, wouldn't you agree, Father?" A flicker of unease crossed Richard's face before his confident smile returned. "Of course, son. That's why we arranged for you two to meet multiple times before the wedding." "Except those meetings were with someone else, weren't they?" Amara said quietly, her voice calm but her eyes challenging her father. William Johnson's smile faltered. "What do you mean, sweetheart?" "I think you know exactly what she means," Maxwell said, keeping his voice level. "But we can discuss that another time. Right now, Amara and I would like to hear more about the merger details. After all, as the future leaders of both companies, we should be fully informed." This strategic pivot worked perfectly. The parents, eager to avoid the subject of their deception, launched into detailed explanations of the business arrangement. As they talked, Maxwell and Amara listened intently, mentally noting every detail that could be useful later. Breakfast stretched into a 2-hour business meeting, with servants bringing fresh coffee and pastries as the parents laid out their vision for the combined company. Throughout the discussion, Maxwell observed how Amara asked insightful questions that often left his father impressed despite himself. Her intelligence was obvious, and Maxwell found himself admiring her business acumen. When the meeting finally concluded, their parents seemed satisfied, clearly believing their children had accepted the situation and were now focused on the business aspects rather than the personal deception. "We'll leave you newlyweds alone for the rest of the day," Eleanor said with a knowing smile that made Maxwell cringe internally. "Tomorrow we'll need to discuss your living arrangements and public appearances for the coming months." After their parents left, Maxwell and Amara looked at each other with renewed determination. "They're planning every aspect of our lives," Amara said, anger evident in her voice. "Not for long," Maxwell replied. "Now that we know the structure of the merger, we can start planning our counterattack. But first..." He hesitated, then continued, "I'd like to actually get to know my wife. The real you, not the version our parents have constructed." Amara looked surprised, then pleased. "I'd like that too. Where do we start?" "How about that hike I mentioned? My cabin in the mountains. We could escape this mausoleum for the day, breathe some fresh air, and talk without worrying about who might be listening." Amara's face lit up with a genuine smile that transformed her features and made Maxwell's heart skip unexpectedly. "That sounds perfect," she said. "Just let me change into something more appropriate for hiking." As Maxwell watched her leave the kitchen, he found himself looking forward to spending the day with her, a feeling he certainly hadn't expected when he first saw her at the altar. Perhaps their arranged marriage contained possibilities neither of them had imagined. The drive to Maxwell's mountain cabin provided a welcome escape from the suffocating atmosphere of the Stone estate. As the sleek black SUV wound its way up the mountain roads, the sprawling city below grew smaller, and the air became fresher with each mile. Maxwell drove while Amara sat in the passenger seat, her window rolled down slightly to feel the mountain breeze. She had changed into jeans, hiking boots, and a simple blue sweater, a stark contrast to the elaborate wedding gown of the previous day. Maxwell found himself stealing glances at her profile as she gazed out at the passing scenery, noticing how the sunlight highlighted the warm undertones in her dark skin. This is beautiful country, Amara said, breaking a comfortable silence that had settled between them. I can see why you come here to escape. It's the only place I feel completely myself, Maxwell admitted. No expectations, no pretenses, no family legacy hanging over my head. What do you do when you're here? Amara asked. Besides hiking, I mean. Maxwell smiled. I read actual books, not business reports. I cook for myself instead of having meals prepared by staff. And I sketch building designs. He hesitated before adding, actually, I built part of the cabin myself. An extension with a studio where I can work on my designs. Amara turned to him with genuine interest. You actually built it? With your own hands? Is that so hard to believe? Maxwell chuckled. Honestly? Yes, Amara admitted. The billionaire CEO getting his hands dirty with actual construction work doesn't fit the image I had of you. And what image was that? We could actually make a good team, Amara said thoughtfully. Professionally speaking. I think we already do, Maxwell replied, surprised to realize how true that felt after just one day of really knowing her. As they hiked back to the cabin, the sky began to darken with approaching storm clouds. The first drops of rain fell just as they reached the porch, quickly turning into a downpour that trapped them at the cabin for the evening. I guess we're staying the night, Maxwell said as thunder rumbled in the distance. These mountain storms can make the roads dangerous. If Amara was concerned about spending another night with her new husband, she didn't show it. Instead, she helped him prepare dinner, and they spent the evening in front of the fireplace, sharing more stories and gradually filling in the gaps of their lives for each other. As lightning flashed outside and rain pounded on the roof, Maxwell found himself thinking how different this arranged marriage was turning out to be from his worst fears. Amara Johnson was not just beautiful, she was intelligent, determined, and surprisingly easy to talk to. For the first time since learning of his father's marriage plans, Maxwell felt a spark of something unexpected. Not just acceptance of his situation, but perhaps even hope. When they finally went to bed, Amara in the main bedroom and Maxwell on the couch, despite her protest that he should take his own bed, Maxwell lay awake listening to the storm, wondering what tomorrow would bring for this unusual partnership that was beginning to feel less like a business arrangement and more like the start of something genuine. The morning after the storm brought clear skies and a tranquility that made the mountain cabin feel even more removed from their complicated lives. Maxwell woke early, his back slightly stiff from sleeping on the couch, and quietly prepared coffee and breakfast. The domestic normalcy of the situation struck him as both strange and oddly comforting. When Amara emerged from the bedroom, her curls tousled from sleep and wearing borrowed clothes that were too large for her frame, Maxwell felt an unexpected warmth spread through his chest. She looked so different from the polished businesswoman or veiled bride. She looked real and somehow more beautiful for it. That coffee smells amazing, she said, accepting the mug he offered with a grateful smile. They ate breakfast on the porch, watching the mist rise from the valley below as the sun climbed higher in the sky. Neither mentioned returning to the city, though both knew their brief mountain sanctuary couldn't last forever. I've been thinking about our situation, Maxwell said finally, setting down his empty mug. What if we turned this arrangement to our advantage, really took control of both companies and reshaped them according to our values, not our fathers? Amara looked at him thoughtfully. You mean, instead of just surviving the next 2 years until we can separate, actually building something worthwhile together? Exactly. You have incredible ideas for Johnson Tech that your father has been suppressing. I have visions for stone industries that go beyond pure profit. What if we used this forced merger to create something better than either company was before? A slow smile spread across Amara's face. A true partnership. It would mean staying married longer than the 2 years we initially discussed, Maxwell pointed out. We'd need to convince everyone our marriage is real. Including our parents, Amara added, her expression becoming more serious. They'd be suspicious if we suddenly seem happy about a situation we were clearly tricked into. Maxwell nodded. We'll need to be careful, appear reluctant at first, then gradually show signs of genuinely connecting. It has to be believable. We could start by confronting them about the deception, Amara suggested. Show our anger, but then appear to slowly warm to each other over time. They spent the morning developing their strategy, mapping out both the personal and professional aspects of their plan. By midday, when they finally began the drive back to the city, they had formed a united front, partners in a scheme of their own making. The stone estate seemed even more imposing and cold after the warmth and simplicity of the cabin. As Maxwell parked in the circular driveway, he could see his mother watching from an upstairs window, no doubt curious about where the newlyweds had spent the night. "Ready?" he asked Amara, who had grown increasingly tense as they approached the estate. She took a deep breath and nodded. "As ready as I'll ever be." Inside, they found both sets of parents waiting in the main living room, champagne already poured as if a celebration was in order. "There they are," William Johnson exclaimed with forced joviality. "We were beginning to worry. We got caught in the storm and stayed at Maxwell's cabin," Amara explained, her voice cool and controlled. "How rustic," Eleanor commented with a slight wrinkle of her nose. Maxwell moved to stand beside Amara, their shoulders nearly touching, a subtle display of unity. "We need to talk," he said firmly. "About the lies you told to make this marriage happen." The atmosphere in the room instantly chilled. Richard Stone set down his champagne glass with a sharp click against the marble side table. "What lies would those be, son?" he asked, his tone dangerous. "You showed me photos of someone else," Maxwell said bluntly. "You led me to believe I was meeting and marrying a completely different woman." The silence that followed was deafening. Eleanor Stone fidgeted with her pearl necklace while William Johnson suddenly became very interested in his own shoes. Only Richard Stone maintained his composure, his face an unreadable mask. "We did what was necessary for the good of both companies," he finally said, his voice firm and unapologetic. "If you had seen the real Amara beforehand, your prejudices might have interfered with the business arrangement." "My prejudices?" Maxwell repeated, genuine anger rising in his voice. "Or yours, father?" William Johnson stepped forward, placing a hand on Richard's arm as if to calm him. "What your father means is that we wanted to ensure the merger went through without complications. Young people can be so emotional about these things." "So you lied to both of us," Amara said, her voice steady despite the emotion in her eyes. "You made decisions about our lives as if we were nothing more than assets to be traded." "Darling," William replied, attempting to sound reasonable, "you've always understood the importance of the family business. This merger will secure the future of Johnson Tech for generations." "At what cost?" Amara demanded. "My dignity? My right to choose my own husband." Eleanor Stone finally spoke, her voice dripping with false sympathy. "It's how these things are done in families like ours, dear. I know it seems harsh now, but you'll come to appreciate the wisdom of our decision." Maxwell could feel Amara trembling slightly beside him, though her face remained composed. He instinctively moved closer to her, his hand finding hers and squeezing it gently. "You had no right," Maxwell said, looking directly at his father. "You may control the company, but you don't control our lives." Richard Stone's eyes narrowed. "Don't be naive, Maxwell. Your life has always been intertwined with Stone Industries. Everything you have, your education, your position, this very house, comes from the company. Your marriage is simply another aspect of your duty to the family legacy." "And what about my happiness?" Maxwell challenged. "Did that factor into your calculations at all?" "Happiness?" Richard scoffed. "That's for ordinary people, son. We build empires." The coldness of his father's words hung in the air. Maxwell felt Amara's hand tighten around his, and in that moment, their planned strategy seemed less like a performance and more like a genuine alliance against the callousness their families represented. "Well," Maxwell said after a long pause, "what's done is done. We're legally married now. But don't expect us to thank you for your manipulation." William Johnson's expression relaxed slightly, apparently relieved that they weren't threatening to annul the marriage immediately. "You'll see in time that we made the right decision. You two are perfect for each other, both intelligent, business-minded, from similar backgrounds." "The merger paperwork is already being processed," Richard added, clearly considering the matter settled. "Your joint finances are being arranged as we speak. The press release about the wedding will go out tomorrow morning." Maxwell and Amara exchanged a look, silently communicating their shared determination. This was exactly what they had anticipated, their parents believing they had won, unaware that their children were already planning to take control. "We'll need our own place," Amara said suddenly, surprising both sets of parents. "Not here at the Stone estate and not at my father's house either." "But darling," William began. "If you expect this marriage to work at all," Amara interrupted firmly, "we need our own space away from both families. Somewhere we can at least try to build something without your constant interference." Maxwell nodded in agreement. "Amara's right. If you want this merger to succeed, give us the space to make this marriage work on our terms." Richard and William exchanged glances, clearly calculating the risks of refusal versus the benefits of appearing magnanimous. "The penthouse in the downtown tower is available," Richard finally conceded. It's technically a Stone Industries property, but it's separate from the family homes. That will do for now, Maxwell agreed, knowing that demanding complete independence immediately would raise suspicions. The penthouse was still under his father's control, but it was a start. And I want to continue my work at Johnson Tech, Amara added. Not as the boss's daughter, but as head of product development with real authority. William frowned but nodded reluctantly. Of course, sweetheart. Your work has always been important. The false sweetness in her father's tone made Amara's jaw tighten, but she said nothing more. The first confrontation had gone as well as could be expected. They had expressed their anger at the deception while simultaneously setting the groundwork for their longer-term plan. We'll move into the penthouse tomorrow, Maxwell announced. Tonight we'll stay at Amara's apartment to collect her things. This declaration clearly surprised their parents, who had expected the newlyweds to remain under the watchful eye of the Stone household for at least a few days. But none of them dared to object, perhaps fearing that pushing too hard might cause their carefully arranged marriage to collapse before it had truly begun. As Maxwell and Amara left the Stone estate an hour later, heading toward her apartment in the city, a weight seemed to lift from both their shoulders. That went better than I expected, Amara admitted as Maxwell navigated through the city traffic. They actually agreed to our demands. Only because they think they've won, Maxwell replied. They believe that now that we're married, they can control us through financial means and social pressure. Little do they know, Amara said with a small smile, we're already 2 steps ahead of them. Maxwell glanced at her, admiring the determined set of her jaw and the intelligence shining in her eyes. We make a good team, Mrs. Stone. The name still felt strange to both of them, but Amara's smile widened slightly. Indeed we do, Mr. Stone. Amara's apartment was a revelation to Maxwell. A warm, colorful space filled with books, artwork from around the world and cutting-edge technology seamlessly integrated into the comfortable environment. It was the complete opposite of the cold, formal Stone estate, reflecting Amara's personality in every detail. This is amazing, Maxwell said as he walked around the open-plan living area. You designed this yourself? Amara nodded, watching him explore her space with obvious curiosity. This is the real me. Not the perfect daughter my father wants to present to the world, not the decorative wife he imagined I would be to you. Just Amara. Maxwell stopped before a wall of framed patents. Evidence of Amara's brilliant mind and technical innovations. Your father is a fool for not recognizing your true value to the company. Both our fathers are fools, Amara replied, moving to stand beside him. They're so caught up in their old-fashioned ideas about power and legacy that they can't see the future staring them in the face. Their loss is our gain, Maxwell said, turning to face her. Together we can build something better than either of them imagined. As they stood there, surrounded by the evidence of Amara's achievements and creativity, a new understanding seemed to form between them. This marriage, forced upon them through lies and manipulation, had accidentally brought together 2 people who shared not just similar experiences with controlling parents, but similar visions for the future. That night, as Maxwell prepared to sleep on Amara's couch, despite her insistence that her guest room was perfectly available, he found himself thinking less about revenge against their parents and more about the possibilities that lay ahead, possibilities that increasingly included Amara as a true partner, not just a convenient ally. What neither of them could have anticipated was how quickly their pretense of gradually falling in love would begin to feel less like an act and more like a natural progression of the connection forming between them. The downtown penthouse was exactly what one would expect from a property owned by Stone Industries, luxurious, elegant, and designed to impress rather than comfort. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered spectacular views of the city skyline, while expensive artwork and designer furniture filled the spacious rooms. Well, it's certainly grand, Amara commented as they explored their new temporary home, her tone suggesting she found it beautiful but soulless. Maxwell nodded in agreement. My father's taste has always leaned toward the ostentatious. But at least we have space and privacy here. The movers had already delivered Amara's belongings, packed in dozens of carefully labeled boxes. Maxwell watched as she immediately began transforming the sterile environment, adding colorful throws to the sleek leather furniture, placing her books on empty shelves, and setting up smart home devices to make the space more functional. I hope you don't mind, she said, noticing his observation. I know it's technically your family's property. Not at all, Maxwell assured her. Please make it ours. God knows it needs some warmth. Over the next few days, they settled into a routine that balanced their professional responsibilities with their new personal arrangement. Maxwell had converted one of the penthouse's extra bedrooms into a home office for himself, while Amara claimed another as her workspace for the days she wasn't needed at the Johnson Tech offices. They had separate bedrooms, of course, maintaining appropriate boundaries despite their growing friendship. But they often found themselves sharing meals, discussing their days, and strategizing about their joint mission to take control of their family companies. A week after moving into the penthouse, they faced their first public appearance as a married couple, a charity gala hosted by the city's business elite. It would be their debut in society since the wedding, and they knew all eyes would be on them. "Ready for this?" Maxwell asked as they prepared to leave the penthouse, adjusting his bow tie in the hallway mirror. Amara emerged from her bedroom in a stunning emerald gown that complemented her dark skin perfectly. Her natural curls were styled in an elegant updo, and she wore diamond earrings that caught the light when she moved. Maxwell found himself momentarily speechless. In the week they had lived together, he had grown accustomed to seeing Amara in casual business attire or comfortable loungewear. This transformation reminded him of how truly beautiful his wife was, not just physically, but in the confidence and grace with which she carried herself. "You look," he began, searching for the right words. "Presentable enough to be Mrs. Stone?" Amara suggested with a hint of teasing in her voice. "Breathtaking," Maxwell finished honestly. A slight blush colored Amara's cheeks at the genuine compliment. "Thank you. You clean up pretty well yourself." In the elevator down to the waiting car, they reviewed their strategy for the evening. They needed to appear like a couple still getting to know each other, not overly affectionate but not completely distant either. Just enough togetherness to start the rumor mill speculating that perhaps this arranged marriage might be developing into something real. "Remember," Amara said as the elevator descended, "we're supposed to be in the early stages of warming up to each other after being initially upset about the arrangement." Maxwell nodded. "So some tension but with moments of genuine connection. Should we have a minor disagreement at some point? Make it look real?" "Good idea," Amara agreed. "Maybe about your father's latest development project? I could express environmental concerns, you could initially defend the family business, then appear to consider my perspective." "Perfect. And I'll be sure to get you champagne without asking, the wrong kind of course, so you can correct me and I can apologize. Small moments that show we're still figuring each other out." Amara smiled approvingly. "You're getting quite good at this deception, Mr. Stone." "I had an excellent teacher in my father," Maxwell replied dryly, "though I prefer to think of it as strategic acting rather than deception." The charity gala was held at the city's most exclusive hotel, with a guest list that read like a who's who of wealthy elites. As Maxwell and Amara entered the grand ballroom, conversation briefly dimmed as curious eyes turned toward the newlyweds. Maxwell placed his hand lightly on the small of Amara's back, guiding her through the crowd. The simple touch was part of their act, but he couldn't help noticing how natural it felt, and how Amara leaned slightly into his touch rather than stiffening as she might have just a week ago. "Maxwell, Amara." Eleanor Stone approached, air-kissing both their cheeks. "You look wonderful together. Everyone's been asking about you." "I'm sure they have, Mother," Maxwell replied with a tight smile. "Especially since they were all expecting to meet a different bride." Eleanor's smile faltered momentarily before she recovered her composure. "Water under the bridge, darling. What matters is that you two are married now and representing both families. Speaking of which, the Harringtons are eager to discuss the new merger. Come along." As Eleanor led them toward an elderly couple who had been major investors in Stone Industries for decades, Amara whispered to Maxwell, "Your mother is remarkably skilled at avoiding uncomfortable topics." "Years of practice," he murmured back. "She's been ignoring inconvenient truths since before I was born." The evening progressed with Maxwell and Amara executing their strategy flawlessly. They mingled with business associates, carefully projecting the image of a new couple with some lingering tension but growing potential. They had their planned disagreement about environmental concerns in the Stone Industries' newest development, with Maxwell ultimately appearing to value Amara's perspective, a performance that wasn't entirely acting as he genuinely did respect her views. When they took to the dance floor for a waltz, they continued their controlled performance, maintaining a proper distance while still moving together with surprising harmony. "Everyone's watching us," Amara noted as Maxwell guided her through a turn. "Let them watch," he replied. "They're seeing exactly what we want them to see." What neither of them acknowledged was that somewhere during their carefully choreographed evening, moments of their performance had begun to feel less like acting and more like reality. When Amara laughed at something Maxwell said, her amusement was genuine. When Maxwell's hand rested on her waist during their dance, The warmth that spread through both of them wasn't fabricated for their audience. As the evening wound down and they prepared to leave, Maxwell noticed his father deep in conversation with William Johnson and several other business associates. The men were huddled together, occasionally glancing in the newlyweds' direction with satisfied expressions. "They're plotting something," Maxwell murmured to Amara as they collected their coats. "They're always plotting something," Amara replied, following his gaze. "But so are we." In the car ride home, they analyzed the evening's success, noting which business connections might be valuable for their long-term plans and which social interactions had most effectively sold their evolving relationship narrative. "I'd say it was a successful debut," Amara concluded as they entered the penthouse elevator. "Though your Aunt Judith asked me 3 times if I was adjusting well to American customs." Maxwell winced. "I'm sorry. She's from another era entirely." "I was born in Boston," Amara said with an eye roll. "I'm as American as she is." But I smiled and thanked her for her concern, like a good daughter-in-law. Back in the penthouse, they both kicked off their formal shoes with identical sighs of relief, sharing a laugh at their synchronized moment of comfort-seeking. "Nightcap," Maxwell offered, loosening his bow tie. "I think we've earned it." They settled on the balcony with glasses of whiskey, the city lights spread out below them like a carpet of stars. The night air was cool but not uncomfortable, and the privacy of their 50th floor perch allowed them to finally drop their carefully maintained facades. "Can I ask you something personal?" Amara said after a comfortable silence. Maxwell nodded, taking a sip of his drink. "Of course. When you first saw me at the altar, the real me, not who you were expecting, what went through your mind?" "Honestly." Maxwell considered the question carefully, knowing the importance of his answer. "Confusion first. Then anger at my father for the deception." He paused, then decided honesty was best. "And yes, surprise at how different you were from the photos. But not disappointment, Amara. I need you to know that." "You hesitated," she pointed out softly. "At the altar. Everyone saw it." "I hesitated because I realized I was being manipulated, not because of you." Maxwell turned to face her directly. "The moment I truly saw you, not just your appearance but who you are, was when you looked at me with those incredibly expressive eyes and whispered, 'I'm sorry.' In that moment, I realized you were as much a victim of our parents' schemes as I was." Amara studied his face, perhaps searching for any sign of insincerity. "And now? After a week of living together, of planning together? What do you think now?" The question hung between them, weighted with possibilities. Maxwell found himself setting down his glass and reaching for her hand. "I think," he said slowly, "that our parents may have accidentally done something right for all the wrong reasons. I think you're brilliant, strong, and far more than they ever gave you credit for. And I think this partnership of ours might be the best thing that's happened to either of us in a long time." Amara's fingers tightened around his, her eyes reflecting the city lights as she processed his words. "It's strange, isn't it? A week ago, we were strangers thrust into a marriage neither of us wanted. And now? Maxwell prompted when she didn't continue. A small smile curved Amara's lips. "And now I find myself genuinely looking forward to our breakfast conversations each morning. To hearing about your day. To planning our future, even if it's just a strategic future." The moment between them stretched, filled with unspoken possibilities. Maxwell was suddenly aware of how close they were sitting, of the warmth of her hand in his, of how the moonlight accentuated her delicate features. For a brief moment he wondered what it would be like to close the distance between them, to kiss his wife for real. Not the formal peck they had shared at the wedding, but a genuine expression of the connection that was undeniably forming between them. The moment passed when Amara's phone chimed with a message, breaking the spell. She reluctantly withdrew her hand to check the notification. "It's my team at Johnson Tech," she explained. "The new assistive technology prototype is having issues. I might need to go in early tomorrow." Maxwell nodded, simultaneously disappointed and relieved that the intense moment had been interrupted. They were still finding their footing in this complex relationship, and rushing things, even if his feelings were beginning to become real, could complicate their carefully laid plans. "You should get some rest then," he said, standing and collecting their empty glasses. "I have an early meeting tomorrow as well. Stone Industries board members want to discuss how the merger will affect ongoing projects." As they prepared to head to their separate bedrooms, Amara paused in the hallway. "Maxwell?" "Yes." "Thank you for being honest about your reaction at the altar. And for being such a good partner in all of this. I know it's not what either of us planned, but maybe it's not so terrible after all," he suggested with a gentle smile. Amara nodded, her eyes meeting his with newfound warmth. Not terrible at all. Good night, Maxwell. Good night, Amara. As Maxwell lay in bed that night, staring at the ceiling, he realized that their plan to convince the world they were gradually falling in love might be becoming complicated by the fact that, at least on his part, it was starting to feel less like an act and more like reality. The question that kept him awake was whether Amara might possibly be feeling the same way, and what that would mean for their carefully constructed arrangement. 3 months into their marriage, Maxwell and Amara had settled into a rhythm that blended their professional ambitions with their evolving personal relationship. Their strategy was working better than either had anticipated. They had gradually positioned themselves as the new power couple of the business world, with Maxwell taking more control over Stone Industries' day-to-day operations and Amara finally receiving the recognition she deserved at Johnson Tech. Their parents, initially suspicious of their sudden cooperation, had grown complacent as the merger progressed smoothly and the newlyweds appeared to be developing a genuine connection. Richard Stone had even begun including Maxwell in major decisions, perhaps believing that his son had finally embraced the family legacy now that he was properly married. On a crisp winter morning, Maxwell was reviewing architectural plans for a new sustainable housing development, a project he had personally championed against his father's initial objections, when his assistant interrupted with an urgent message. Mrs. Stone is on line 1, sir. She says it's important. Maxwell picked up immediately, concerned by the formal way his assistant had referred to Amara. They usually communicated by text or direct cell phone calls. Amara? Is everything all right? Maxwell. Her voice sounded strained. Can you come to Johnson Tech as soon as possible? There's something you need to see. I'll be there in 20 minutes, he promised, already standing and reaching for his coat. The Johnson Tech headquarters was a gleaming glass tower in the heart of the technology district, its innovative design a stark contrast to the more traditional Stone Industries building across town. Maxwell had visited several times since their marriage, but always by arrangement, usually for joint meetings or public appearances. As he entered the lobby, the receptionist recognized him immediately. Mr. Stone. Mrs. Stone is expecting you in the executive conference room on the 40th floor. She asked that you come directly up. The elevator ride gave Maxwell time to wonder what could be so urgent. Had something gone wrong with the merger? Had their parents discovered their plan to gradually take control of both companies? Or was it something more personal? When the elevator doors opened on the 40th floor, Maxwell was surprised to find William Johnson waiting for him instead of Amara. Maxwell, my boy, William said with a forced smile. Thank you for coming so quickly. Where's Amara? Maxwell asked, immediately suspicious. She's in the conference room with your father and our legal teams. A situation has developed that requires our immediate attention. Maxwell followed his father-in-law down the hallway, his concern growing with each step. When they entered the conference room, he immediately sought out Amara, finding her seated at the far end of the table, her face tense but composed. Their eyes met briefly, and he could see both anger and worry in her expression. Richard Stone sat opposite Amara, flanked by Stone Industries' chief legal counsel and 2 other executives Maxwell recognized from the board. Several Johnson Tech executives and lawyers filled the remaining seats. What's going on? Maxwell asked, moving to stand beside Amara's chair in a clear show of solidarity. Richard Stone cleared his throat. We've uncovered some irregularities in the merger documentation, specifically regarding the joint projects between Stone Industries and Johnson Tech. What irregularities? Maxwell pressed, placing a hand on Amara's shoulder. Amara spoke up, her voice controlled but with an undercurrent of anger. They're claiming my assistive technology division is underperforming and should be folded into Stone Industries' R&D department, effectively killing the projects we've been developing for years. That's not what we said, William Johnson interjected quickly. We simply believe these projects would benefit from Stone Industries' resources and management structure. The same management that has consistently prioritized profit over innovation? Amara challenged. The same structure that has delayed every environmentally sustainable initiative Maxwell has proposed? Richard Stone's expression hardened. The terms of the merger give us the right to restructure underperforming divisions. According to the quarterly reports. According to manipulated quarterly reports, Amara interrupted. Someone deliberately presented our financial projections in a way that makes the division appear unprofitable by isolating costs without accounting for long-term benefits and tax incentives. Maxwell's mind raced as he processed the situation. This was clearly an attempt by their fathers to regain control, to remind the newlyweds that despite their growing influence, The older generation still held the reins of power. "May I see these reports?" Maxwell asked calmly, holding out his hand. One of the lawyers slid a folder across the table. Maxwell opened it and began reviewing the documents, his years of business training allowing him to quickly identify the creative accounting that had been used to make Amara's division appear unsuccessful. "This is ridiculous," he said finally, closing the folder with a decisive snap. "These numbers have been deliberately misinterpreted. The assistive technology division is not only profitable when properly evaluated, but it's also one of the most innovative branches of either company." "Son," Richard Stone began in a patronizing tone, "I understand you want to support your wife's pet projects, but business decisions must be based on hard facts, not marital loyalty." The condescension in his father's voice made Maxwell's jaw tighten. He glanced at Amara, who was watching him intently, perhaps wondering which side he would ultimately take in this unexpected confrontation. Maxwell made his decision instantly, though to anyone observing, it wouldn't have appeared to require any thought at all. He placed the folder back on the table and moved to stand directly behind Amara's chair, his hands resting supportively on her shoulders. "Amara's division stays intact," he said firmly. "In fact, I'm proposing we increase its funding by reallocating resources from Stone Industries' luxury real estate division, which has consistently underperformed for the past 3 quarters. Richard Stone's face reddened. "You can't make that decision unilaterally." "Actually, I can," Maxwell replied. "As COO of Stone Industries and co-chair of the merger committee, I have authority to propose resource allocation. Unless you want to call a full board vote." It was a calculated risk. Maxwell and Amara had been quietly building alliances on both boards over the past months, but they hadn't planned to reveal the extent of their influence so soon. William Johnson looked uneasily between his daughter and his business partner. "Perhaps we should take some time to reconsider the situation. No need to make hasty decisions." "I agree," Amara said smoothly, her composure fully restored now that she knew Maxwell was firmly on her side. "Maxwell and I will prepare a comprehensive analysis of both divisions for the next board meeting. Until then, all restructuring plans are on hold." The authority in her voice left no room for argument, and Maxwell felt a surge of pride at how effectively she had taken control of the situation. This was the real Amara Johnson, brilliant, decisive, and unwilling to be manipulated by the men who had underestimated her for so long. The meeting disbanded with tension still thick in the air. As the lawyers and executives filed out, Richard Stone lingered, gesturing for Maxwell to join him in the corner of the room. "What do you think you're doing?" Richard demanded in a harsh whisper once they were relatively private. "Siding with your wife against your own family business?" "I'm doing what's right for both companies," Maxwell replied evenly. "Amara's work is groundbreaking. It will not only be profitable in the long run but will also establish our merged company as a leader in assistive technology, a rapidly growing market." Richard studied his son's face with narrowed eyes. "This isn't just about business, is it? You've actually developed feelings for her." The question caught Maxwell off guard, though he should have expected it. His father had always been perceptive when it came to potential weaknesses he could exploit. "My relationship with my wife is not your concern," Maxwell said carefully. "But yes, I respect and support Amara. Something you might have considered before tricking us into this marriage." A calculating look passed over Richard's face. "Well, this is an unexpected development. When we arranged this match, we thought you'd eventually come to accept it as a business necessity. We never anticipated you might actually fall for the girl." The dismissive way Richard referred to Amara, a brilliant executive in her own right, made Maxwell's anger flare. "Her name is Amara. She's the head of product development at Johnson Tech and my wife. Show some respect." Richard's eyebrows rose at his son's vehemence. "I see. Well, son, just remember that mixing business with pleasure can cloud judgment. Don't let your feelings interfere with what's best for Stone Industries." With that parting warning, Richard left the conference room, leaving Maxwell to process the confrontation and its implications. Amara approached him once they were alone, concern evident in her expression. "What did your father say to you?" Maxwell shook his head. "Nothing important. Just trying to drive a wedge between us." "Did he succeed?" Amara asked quietly. Maxwell turned to face her fully, taking both her hands in his. "Not even close. We're partners in this, Amara. All the way." The relief in her eyes was palpable, but there was something else there too, a warmth that made Maxwell's heart beat faster. "Thank you for standing up for my division," she said. "You didn't have to do that so publicly." "Yes, I did," Maxwell insisted. Not just because it's the right business decision, but because... He hesitated, suddenly aware that they were standing on the edge of a significant shift in their relationship. Because... Amara prompted, her eyes never leaving his. Because I care about what matters to you, he finished simply. Your work is important, and not just for business reasons. It helps people. It makes a difference in ways my father could never understand. Amara's expression softened, and she squeezed his hands. I'm beginning to think we make a better team than either of us anticipated. Much better, Maxwell agreed with a smile. They left Johnson Tech together, deciding to take the rest of the day off to strategize about their response to their father's attempted power play. As they walked through the city streets, Maxwell found himself taking Amara's hand naturally, without the conscious thought that this was part of their public performance. And when she interlaced her fingers with his and moved closer to his side to avoid a passing crowd, he realized that somewhere along the way, the line between their strategic partnership and something deeper had begun to blur. That evening, as they sat together in the penthouse living room surrounded by spreadsheets and legal documents, building their case for the next board meeting, Maxwell caught himself watching Amara as she worked, admiring the way she bit her lower lip in concentration, the decisive way she highlighted important passages, the brilliant insights she offered as they developed their strategy. You're staring, she noted without looking up from her tablet. Do I have something on my face? No, Maxwell replied honestly. I was just thinking how fortunate I am. This made her look up, a questioning expression on her face. Fortunate? To be forced into marriage through deception and manipulation? Maxwell chuckled. When you put it like that, it sounds terrible. But yes, fortunate that if I had to be forced into marriage, it was to someone like you. Amara set down her tablet, giving him her full attention. Someone like me, she repeated. And what exactly am I like, Maxwell Stone? The teasing challenge in her voice made him smile, but he answered seriously. You're brilliant, determined, compassionate about the work you do. You don't back down when you believe in something. You see through people's facades, including mine. He paused, then added softly, and you're beautiful inside and out in ways our families were too blind to see. Amara's expression shifted from playful to something more vulnerable. Maxwell, are we still acting? Is this still part of our strategy? The question hung between them, laden with possibilities. Maxwell moved closer to her on the couch, his eyes never leaving hers. I don't think I'm acting anymore, Amara. I'm not sure I have been for some time now. Her breath caught, and for a moment, Maxwell feared he had misread the situation, had pushed too far too fast. But then she reached up, her hand gently touching his face. Neither am I, she whispered. When their lips met, it wasn't for show, wasn't for any strategic purpose or public performance. It was real, a genuine expression of feelings that had been growing steadily over the months of their unusual marriage. The kiss deepened, and Maxwell pulled Amara closer, marveling at how right it felt to hold her this way. When they finally broke apart, both slightly breathless, Amara rested her forehead against his. Well, she said with a small laugh. This certainly complicates our 2-year plan. Maxwell smiled, tucking a strand of hair behind her ear. I think our plan has been evolving for a while now. The question is, where do we go from here? Amara's eyes met his, serious but warm. Forward, together. But at our pace, not the one our families tried to force on us. As they returned to their work, occasionally stealing glances and brushing hands, both knew that what had started as a strategic alliance had transformed into something neither had expected but both now welcomed. A genuine chance at love born from the most unlikely of beginnings. 6 months into their marriage, Maxwell and Amara had become inseparable both professionally and personally. Their initial strategic partnership had blossomed into a genuine relationship, though they had kept the depth of their feelings private, still wary of giving their manipulative parents any emotional leverage. At work, they had successfully thwarted several attempts by Richard Stone and William Johnson to undermine their growing influence within the companies. The older men had become increasingly frustrated as their children outmaneuvered them at every turn, gradually winning the loyalty of key board members and executives. On the personal front, Maxwell and Amara had transitioned from separate bedrooms to sharing the master suite in the penthouse, their initial awkwardness giving way to a comfortable intimacy that both found unexpectedly fulfilling. Their forced marriage had evolved into a chosen one, though they had yet to formally acknowledge this shift to anyone outside their private relationship. It was a rainy Saturday morning when Maxwell's phone rang, interrupting their peaceful breakfast. He frowned at the screen before answering. Henry? Is everything all right at the cabin? Amara watched with concern as Maxwell's expression grew serious during the conversation. When he hung up, he turned to her with troubled eyes. Someone broke into the cabin last night. Henry says nothing valuable was taken, but my office was ransacked, specifically my architectural designs and the personal documents I keep there. Amara set down her coffee cup. Your father? That would be my guess, Maxwell replied grimly. He's never approved of my architectural work. He probably thinks it's a distraction from the company. Or he's looking for leverage, Amara suggested. Something to use against us now that he realizes we're genuinely united. Maxwell nodded, his jaw tight with anger. We should go up there, see exactly what was taken. I'll pack a bag, Amara said, already standing. The drive to the mountain cabin was tense, with Maxwell gripping the steering wheel so tightly his knuckles turned white. Amara placed a gentle hand on his arm. We'll figure this out, she assured him. Whatever they're planning, we're smarter than they are. Maxwell's expression softened at her touch. Have I told you lately how grateful I am that you're my wife? Not since yesterday, Amara replied with a small smile. But I never tire of hearing it. When they arrived at the cabin, Henry was waiting on the porch, his weathered face creased with concern. He led them inside, pointing out the damaged lock on the back door and the mess in Maxwell's studio. I would have cleaned up, Henry said apologetically, but I figured you'd want to see it as it was. Maxwell surveyed the room with growing anger. Drawers had been emptied, files scattered across the floor, and his carefully organized architectural plans were strewn about carelessly. But what caught his attention was the corner of the room where he kept his most personal documents. Birth certificates, old photographs, family records he had brought here for safekeeping away from the Stone estate. They were thorough, Amara observed, kneeling to gather some of the scattered papers. Looking for something specific, it seems. Maxwell joined her, sorting through the mess to determine what might be missing. After an hour of careful inventory, he sat back on his heels with a puzzled expression. It's strange, Amara said softly. In a way, our families were always meant to be united. Our grandfathers started this journey together. Maxwell took her hand, interlacing their fingers. Maybe we're not just fixing our parents' mistakes. Maybe we're fulfilling our grandfather's original vision, just in a way no one could have predicted. Amara leaned against his shoulder, her voice thoughtful. I've been thinking about what this means for us personally. Our marriage was arranged based on lies, but now. Maxwell prompted when she hesitated. She turned to face him fully, her eyes reflecting the golden light of the setting sun. Now I'm grateful for it despite how it began. Because it brought me to you. Maxwell reached up to cup her face gently. I've fallen in love with you, Amara. Not because of any arrangement or business strategy, but because of who you are. The words, spoken aloud for the first time, hung in the air between them. Amara's eyes glistened with emotion as she leaned forward to press her forehead against his. I love you too, she whispered. And that's the one thing our parents never planned for. Their kiss was different this time. Deeper, more certain, filled with the knowledge that what had begun as a deception had transformed into something genuine and precious. Later that night, as they lay together in the cabin's master bedroom, Amara traced idle patterns on Maxwell's chest. What do we do now? She asked. About our fathers, the companies, the truth? Maxwell covered her hand with his own. We use what we've learned, but carefully. We continue taking control of both companies, but now with a clearer purpose. And when the time is right, we reveal the truth, not just to our parents but to everyone. And us? Amara asked, her voice soft in the darkness. What about our future? Maxwell pulled her closer, pressing a kiss to her forehead. Our future is whatever we choose to make it, together. No more acting, no more pretending. Just us building something real. As they drifted to sleep in each other's arms, both felt a new sense of purpose and possibility. What had begun as an arrangement forced upon them had become a partnership of their own choosing, strengthened now by the knowledge that perhaps, in some cosmic way, their paths had always been destined to converge. The knowledge of their grandfather's shared history transformed Maxwell and Amara's approach to their quest for control of the family companies. What had begun as a rebellion against their parents' manipulation became a mission to restore the original vision that had been corrupted by greed and ego. Over the following weeks, they carefully laid the groundwork for their plan. They scheduled a joint board meeting for both companies, ostensibly to present the final phase of the merger process. Behind the scenes, they secured allies, gathered evidence, and prepared for what would undoubtedly be the most consequential confrontation of their lives. The night before the board meeting, they stood together on the penthouse balcony, The city lights spread out below them like a reflection of the star-filled sky above. "Are you nervous?" Amara asked, noting the tension in Maxwell's shoulders as he leaned against the railing. "A little," he admitted. "Tomorrow we change everything, our companies, our family legacies, our future." Amara slipped her arm around his waist. "Whatever happens, we face it together." Maxwell turned to look at her, still sometimes amazed by how completely his feelings for this woman had transformed from suspicion to deep, unwavering love. "Have I told you today how much I love you?" "Yes," she smiled, "but I'll never tire of hearing it." He pulled her into his arms, drawing strength from her presence. "I love you, Amara Stone. And not because of any arrangement or family obligation, but because you are the most remarkable person I've ever known." "And I love you," she replied, reaching up to trace the line of his jaw with gentle fingers. "My husband by force but partner by choice." Their kiss was a promise, of commitment, of strength, of a shared vision for the future that neither could have imagined on that fateful wedding day. The next morning they dressed with care, Maxwell in a perfectly tailored suit that projected authority, Amara in a striking blue dress that complemented her dark skin and radiated confidence. As they prepared to leave the penthouse, Maxwell picked up the leather portfolio containing copies of his grandfather's documents. "Ready to make history?" he asked, offering Amara his arm. She took it with a determined smile. "Ready to correct it?" The Stone Industries conference room was already filled when they arrived. Board members from both companies sat around the massive table, with Richard Stone and William Johnson positioned at the head as if their leadership was still unquestioned. Maxwell noted the smug expressions on both men's faces. Clearly, they believed they were still in control of the situation. "Ah, the happy couple arrives," Richard announced with false joviality. "We were just discussing the final integration of Johnson Tech's research divisions into Stone Industries' corporate structure." Maxwell and Amara exchanged a brief glance, communicating silently as they had learned to do over the months of their marriage. Without responding to Richard's comment, they moved to the front of the room. "Thank you all for being here today," Maxwell began, his voice steady and authoritative. "What we're about to share will change the direction of both our companies, and correct a historical injustice that has shaped our family businesses for generations." Richard Stone's smile faltered slightly. "Son, we've already distributed the agenda. Perhaps you could follow the established protocol." "I think you'll want to hear this first, Father," Maxwell interrupted firmly. He opened the portfolio and distributed copies of key documents to each board member. "What is the meaning of this?" William Johnson demanded as he scanned the papers in front of him, his face paling visibly. Amara stepped forward. "These are the original founding documents of Stone Industries, featuring both Harold Stone and William Johnson Sr. as equal partners and co-founders." A murmur of surprise rippled through the room as board members examined the evidence before them. "This is absurd," Richard Stone sputtered, though his expression betrayed his recognition of the documents. "These are clearly forgeries." "They're authenticated," Maxwell countered calmly. "As you well know, Father, since you've been searching for them for years. That break-in at my cabin wasn't a random act of vandalism, was it?" Richard's face reddened, but he remained silent. Maxwell continued, addressing the entire board now. "The truth, which our fathers have concealed for decades, is that Stone Industries was founded as a partnership. When William Johnson Sr. wanted to develop assistive technologies, projects deemed unprofitable by investors, he was forced out. He went on to found Johnson Tech, while his name was systematically erased from Stone Industries' official history." Amara picked up the narrative seamlessly. "Our grandfather's partnership was destroyed by short-sighted profit concerns and ego. And our fathers have continued that feud, prioritizing control and money over innovation and positive impact." William Johnson rose to his feet, his voice tight with barely controlled anger. "This is outrageous. Even if these documents were legitimate, which I don't concede, any claims based on them would be long expired under statute of limitations laws." "You're right about the legal claims," Maxwell agreed, surprising his father-in-law. "This isn't about litigation or ownership disputes. It's about honesty and returning to the founding vision of both our grandfathers." Amara moved to stand shoulder to shoulder with Maxwell. "That's why we're proposing a complete reorganization of the merged company. Not as Stone Industries absorbing Johnson Tech, but as a new entity that honors both legacies and returns to the original mission of combining technological innovation with sound business practices, including the assistive technology division that sparked the original divide." Maxwell activated the presentation screen, revealing their comprehensive plan for the restructured company. We're proposing a new name, Stone Johnson Innovations. Equal acknowledgement of both founding families, with a corporate structure that balances profit with purpose. The board members leaned forward, studying the detailed plans with obvious interest. Several of the younger executives, allies Maxwell and Amara had cultivated over the past months, were already nodding in approval. Richard Stone slammed his hand on the table. This is nothing short of a coup. You have no authority to propose such sweeping changes without my approval as CEO. Actually, Father, Maxwell replied calmly, as of this morning, we have the proxy votes of 58% of Stone Industries shareholders and 62% of Johnson Tech shareholders. The boards can vote today to implement these changes immediately, including new leadership structure. The look of shock on Richard Stone's face was matched only by the stunned expression of William Johnson. Both men had clearly underestimated just how thoroughly their children had outmaneuvered them. You planned this all along, Richard said, his voice low with accusation. This marriage, this merger, it was never about following our direction. It was about taking control. No, Father, Maxwell corrected him. You planned the marriage and merger to bury the truth about our company's shared history. Amara and I simply discovered that truth and decided to honor it rather than continue the deception. William Johnson turned to his daughter, his expression a mixture of anger and disbelief. And you, Amara? After everything I've done to secure your future in this business. Amara met her father's gaze steadily. What you did was treat me as a bargaining chip rather than a capable executive. You showed Maxwell fake photos to trick him into this marriage. You've repeatedly tried to diminish my division's work and contributions. So yes, I chose to partner with my husband to create something better than what either of you envisioned. A silence fell over the room as the board members watched the family drama unfold against the backdrop of this corporate revolution. Finally, Eleanor Stone, who had remained silent until now, spoke up from her seat near the back of the room. May I see those original documents? Maxwell was surprised by his mother's request but nodded. Eleanor rose gracefully and examined the papers, her fingers tracing the signatures with unexpected tenderness. Harold told me about William Sr., she said quietly, looking first at her husband and then at her son. Before he died, he expressed regret about how things had ended between them. She straightened, addressing the entire room with surprising authority. I believe these documents are genuine. And I believe my son and daughter-in-law's proposal has merit. Richard Stone stared at his wife in shock. Eleanor, you can't possibly. It's time for a new generation to lead, Richard, she interrupted with unexpected firmness. Our children have shown more wisdom and vision than either you or William have in decades of leadership. Her intervention created a palpable shift in the room's atmosphere. Several board members who had been hesitating now nodded in agreement. The senior board member of Stone Industries, a man who had served since Maxwell's grandfather's time, cleared his throat. I move that we put the reorganization proposal to an immediate vote. I second, called the head of research and development from Johnson Tech, a woman who had long supported Amara's innovative projects. What followed was a decisive victory for Maxwell and Amara's vision. The board voted overwhelmingly to approve the creation of Stone Johnson Innovations, with Maxwell as CEO and Amara as Chief Innovation Officer. Richard Stone and William Johnson were offered advisory positions on the board, a graceful way to transition them out of power while acknowledging their contributions. As the meeting concluded, board members approached the young couple to offer congratulations and express excitement about the new direction. Richard Stone and William Johnson slipped out without speaking to their children, their expressions dark with defeat and wounded pride. When the room had emptied except for Maxwell and Amara, they finally allowed themselves to embrace, the tension of the confrontation giving way to relief and triumph. We did it, Amara whispered against Maxwell's shoulder. We did, he agreed, holding her tightly. Stone Johnson Innovations is born. As they gathered their materials to leave, Eleanor Stone returned to the conference room alone. She approached the couple with an expression that was difficult to read. Mother, Maxwell acknowledged cautiously, unsure where her loyalties truly lay after her surprising support during the meeting. Eleanor smiled sadly. I owe you both an apology. I knew about the deception with the photographs. I knew this marriage was arranged through manipulation. And I said nothing. Why did you support us today? Amara asked directly. Eleanor sighed. Because Harold Stone, Maxwell's grandfather, made me promise on his deathbed to help heal the rift between our families when the time came. I failed to keep that promise for many years, allowing Richard's ambition to overshadow what was right. She looked at her son with genuine regret. I should have been stronger, Maxwell. I'm sorry. Maxwell was stunned by his mother's confession. All his life, Eleanor had seemed a passive participant in his father's schemes, a decorative accessory to the Stone family power. This glimpse of her own regrets and secret promises revealed a depth he had never recognized. It's not too late to help us build something better, he told her, offering his hand. Eleanor took it with a grateful smile, then surprised them both by embracing Amara as well. Your grandfathers would be proud of you both. Not just for restoring their shared legacy, but for finding your way to each other despite everything. After Eleanor left, Maxwell and Amara stood alone in the conference room where they had just changed the course of both their family histories. What do you think our fathers will do? Amara asked. Maxwell shrugged. They'll fight it at first. Rage, threaten, maybe try to undermine us. But eventually they'll realize they've lost. The truth is out, the boards have spoken, and the shareholders are behind us. Maxwell took both her hands in his eyes meeting hers with absolute clarity. Now we stop pretending. We tell the world that what began as an arranged marriage has become the best thing that ever happened to either of us. We build our company together and our life together on our own terms. Amara's smile was radiant. From deception to truth. From arrangement to choice. From strangers to partners, Maxwell added, pulling her close. In every way that matters. As they left the building that had once represented their father's control over their lives, they stepped out into the bright sunshine as equal partners in a new venture, both professional and personal, that neither could have imagined on that tense day at the altar when a veiled bride had first whispered, "I'm sorry," to the shocked groom who would eventually become not just her husband, but her greatest ally and truest love. 1 year after the board meeting that changed everything, the grand opening of the Stone Johnson Innovations headquarters was the most anticipated corporate event of the season. The stunning new building, designed by Maxwell himself, embodied the company's dual commitment to aesthetic beauty and functional purpose. Sustainable materials, accessible design features, and cutting-edge technology combined to create a workplace that honored both founding families' legacies while pointing firmly toward the future. Inside the soaring glass atrium, Amara stood before a mirror in a private preparation room, making final adjustments to her appearance before the ceremony. The emerald green dress she had chosen accentuated her dark skin and complemented the elegance of the occasion. Around her neck hung a simple gold pendant containing a small photograph of her grandfather, a reminder of whose vision she was helping to fulfill. A knock at the door interrupted her thoughts. "Come in," she called. Maxwell entered, handsome in a perfectly tailored suit, his eyes lighting up at the sight of her. After a year of marriage, a real marriage of their own choosing, he still looked at her with a mixture of love and wonder that made her heart race. "You look beautiful," he said, crossing the room to kiss her cheek. "Ready for the big moment?" Amara nodded, though her expression was pensive. "I was just thinking about our grandfathers, how they would feel seeing their families united this way after all these years." "I think they would be proud," Maxwell replied, taking her hands in his. "Not just of the company but of us. How we've transformed something that began with deception into something authentic and meaningful." The past year had been challenging but rewarding as they established Stone Johnson Innovations as a leader in both traditional industries and emerging technologies. The assistive technology division that had once been dismissed as unprofitable had become one of their most successful branches, earning acclaim for innovations that improved lives while generating healthy returns for shareholders. Their personal relationship had deepened alongside their professional success. Living and working together, they had developed a partnership based on mutual respect, shared values, and genuine love that grew stronger with each passing day. "Have you heard from your father?" Amara asked, knowing Richard Stone's absence had been a source of pain for Maxwell despite his outward stoicism. Maxwell's expression tightened slightly. "No. Mother says he's still in Europe, extending his sabbatical indefinitely." After the board meeting, Richard Stone had refused to accept the advisory position offered to him, choosing instead to travel abroad rather than witness his son's success in redirecting the family company. His pride had proven more powerful than any familial bond. "And your father?" Maxwell asked in turn. Amara smiled slightly. "He's coming today. Not happy about it but coming. I think Mother finally convinced him that continuing to sulk was only harming his reputation, not ours." William Johnson had taken a different approach than Richard Stone, grudgingly accepting his advisory role while maintaining a cold distance from his daughter. Only recently had he begun showing signs of thawing, perhaps finally recognizing that Amara's vision for the company was proving more successful than he had predicted. "Well, that's progress," Maxwell acknowledged. Maybe someday they'll both realize that we've built something better than either of them imagined. A soft knock at the door signaled that it was time for the ceremony to begin. As they walked together toward the atrium where hundreds of guests, employees and media representatives waited, Maxwell squeezed Amara's hand. "By the way," he whispered, "I have a surprise for you after the ceremony." Amara raised an eyebrow. "A good surprise, I hope?" Maxwell's eyes twinkled. "The best kind." The grand atrium fell silent as Maxwell and Amara took the stage. Behind them stood a large covered painting, commissioned for the occasion and kept secret even from many of the company executives. "Welcome to the official opening of Stone Johnson Innovations Global Headquarters," Maxwell began, his voice confident as he addressed the crowd. "This building represents not just a new chapter for our company, but the fulfillment of a vision that began 3 generations ago." Amara stepped forward. "Many of you know the official story of our company's histories. But today we want to share the true story of partnership, separation, and ultimately reunion." Together, they recounted the tale of their grandfather's original collaboration and the circumstances that had driven them apart. They explained how their own parents had attempted to bury this history through their arranged marriage, and how discovering the truth had transformed both their business and personal relationships. "What began as an arrangement has become the greatest blessing of our lives," Maxwell said, looking at Amara with undisguised love. "Sometimes the right outcome can emerge even from the wrong beginning." Amara smiled at him before turning back to the audience. "Today, we honor both our past and our future with the unveiling of this commissioned artwork that will hang permanently in this atrium." Together, they pulled the covering from the large painting. A collective gasp rose from the audience as the image was revealed. A stunning portrait of Harold Stone and William Johnson Sr. as young men, standing together with blueprints spread before them, their expressions capturing both determination and visionary hope. The painting was masterfully executed, based on photographs from the company archives and family collections, bringing to life the partnership that had been erased from official records for so long. "To our grandfathers," Maxwell said, raising a champagne glass that had been handed to him, "whose shared vision we honor today. And to new beginnings," Amara added, raising her own glass, "built on truth and partnership." The crowd applauded enthusiastically as champagne was distributed for the toast. As Maxwell and Amara mingled with guests afterward, they were approached by William Johnson, who had been watching the ceremony from the back of the room. "That was quite a speech," he said stiffly, though his eyes kept returning to the painting of his father. "Thank you for coming, Dad," Amara replied, genuinely pleased despite his obvious discomfort. William nodded, then surprised them both by adding, "Your grandfather would have approved of what you've built here. He always believed technology should serve people, not the other way around." Coming from William, this was as close to an endorsement as they were likely to receive. Amara impulsively hugged her father, who stood awkwardly for a moment before briefly returning the embrace. "Perhaps I could see those assistive technology prototypes you mentioned last month," William said as they separated. "In an advisory capacity, of course." "Of course," Amara agreed, exchanging a quick glance with Maxwell. It was a small olive branch, but significant coming from a man who had spent decades building walls around himself and his company. As the reception continued, Eleanor Stone approached, elegant as always in a silver gown that matched her perfectly coiffed hair. Unlike William Johnson, she had fully embraced her role in the new company, often serving as a bridge between the old guard and the new leadership. "A magnificent event," she told them, genuine pride in her voice. "And an even more magnificent achievement, what you've built this past year." "Any word from Father?" Maxwell couldn't help asking. Eleanor's expression softened with sympathy. "Not directly. But his assistant called to request information about the company's latest quarterly results. He's watching, Maxwell, even if his pride won't let him acknowledge it yet." After the reception wound down and the last guests departed, Maxwell led Amara to the private elevator that would take them to the penthouse suite at the top of the building, a space that combined living quarters for late work nights with entertainment areas for corporate gatherings. "Now for that surprise," he said as the elevator doors closed behind them. The penthouse was dimly lit when they entered, with only soft landscape lighting illuminating the rooftop garden visible through the glass walls. Maxwell guided Amara through the space to the outdoor terrace, where a small table had been set with candles, flowers, and a bottle of champagne on ice. "Maxwell," Amara breathed, taking in the romantic setting. "What's all this?" He smiled, suddenly looking almost nervous despite the confidence he had displayed throughout the day's events. "1 year ago we took control of our companies and our future. he began, taking both her hands in his. We transformed an arrangement into a choice, a business alliance into a true partnership. Amara smiled, squeezing his hands encouragingly. The best decision I ever made. Mine too, Maxwell agreed. Which is why I wanted to do something I never got to do properly the first time around. To Amara's surprise, he lowered himself to one knee before her, still holding her hands. Amara Johnson Stone, he said, his voice filled with emotion. We were forced into marriage by circumstances and family manipulation. But now I'm asking you, freely and with all my heart, will you choose to stay married to me? Not for business, not for family legacy, but because I love you more than I ever thought possible and want to build a life with you that has nothing to do with corporate mergers and everything to do with partnership and love. Tears filled Amara's eyes as she looked down at the man who had transformed from a reluctant groom to the love of her life. Yes, she whispered. 1,000 times yes. Maxwell stood and pulled a small velvet box from his pocket. Opening it, he revealed a stunning ring with a deep blue sapphire surrounded by diamonds. I never gave you an engagement ring, just the wedding band our parents selected. I wanted you to have something chosen just for you with love. As he slipped the ring onto her finger, alongside the simple gold band from their wedding day, Amara felt the symbolism of the moment profoundly, the arranged marriage now encircled and enhanced by a ring of choice and love. It's beautiful, she said, admiring how the sapphire caught the candlelight. But not as beautiful as what we've built together. Maxwell pulled her close, his forehead resting against hers. I still can't believe how lucky I am. That day at the altar when I first saw you in that heavy veil, I was shocked and angry at being deceived. I could never have imagined that the woman behind that veil would become my best friend, my trusted partner, and the great love of my life. Amara smiled, remembering her own fear and uncertainty on that day. And I never imagined that the man who looked so horrified to see me would become the person I trust most in this world. The one who sees me for exactly who I am and loves me not despite it, but because of it. Their kiss beneath the stars was like a second wedding. One chosen freely with full hearts and open eyes. As they embraced, the city lights sparkled below them and the stars shone above, witnesses to a love that had defied expectations and transformed an arrangement of convenience into a bond of genuine devotion. Later, as they shared champagne and talked about their future, Amara broached a subject they had discussed only tentatively before. I've been thinking, she said, her fingers intertwined with his, about expanding our family. Maxwell's eyes lit up with hope. Children? Amara nodded. I've always wanted to be a mother, but I never wanted to bring children into a loveless marriage or a world where they would be viewed as business assets like we were. But now? Maxwell prompted, his heart racing with anticipation. Now I can imagine raising children with you. Children who would be loved for themselves, not for what they represent to a family legacy, Amara said softly. Children who would know that their parents chose each other and chose them. Maxwell raised her hand to his lips, kissing the new ring on her finger. Nothing would make me happier than building a family with you, Amara. A real family based on love and choice, not obligation and arrangement. As the evening deepened around them, they planned their future together, not just as business partners or even as husband and wife, but as two people who had discovered that sometimes life's most unexpected turns could lead to the greatest happiness. 6 months later, Stone Johnson Innovations had exceeded all market expectations, with the assistive technology division leading the way in both innovation and profitability. Maxwell and Amara had settled into a leadership style that balanced their complementary strengths. His vision and business acumen with her technical brilliance and compassionate approach to product development. On a sunny spring morning, they hosted a small gathering in the rooftop garden of their headquarters. Unlike the grand opening ceremony, this was an intimate event with only close friends and family members in attendance. William Johnson arrived early, his relationship with his daughter gradually warming over the intervening months as he witnessed not only her success but her genuine happiness. He had begun spending time in the research labs, his own passion for technology rekindled by the innovative work being done by Amara's teams. Eleanor Stone greeted guests with gracious warmth, having fully embraced her role as a bridge between generations. To everyone's surprise, she was accompanied by Richard Stone, who had finally returned from his extended European sojourn. Though still stiff and formal, Richard had apparently decided that continued exile was too high a price for pride. Maxwell greeted his father with cautious optimism. I'm glad you could make it, father. Richard nodded curtly. Your mother was quite insistent. She says I've been stubborn. That's one word for it, Maxwell replied with a small smile. Richard cleared his throat uncomfortably. The company appears to be doing well under your leadership. Coming from Richard Stone, this qualified as effusive praise. Maxwell accepted it with a nod. We're building something different than what you envisioned, but something I think you might eventually be proud of. Before Richard could respond, Amara joined them, radiant in a flowing dress that subtly revealed the small curve of her pregnant belly. Richard's eyes widened slightly at the sight, though he quickly composed his features. "Mrs. Stone," he acknowledged with formal politeness. "Richard," Amara replied warmly, refusing to be deterred by his coolness. "I'm glad you're here. This is a day for family after all." She took Maxwell's hand, and together they moved to the center of the garden where a small podium had been set up. The gathered guests quieted as Maxwell tapped a glass for attention. "Thank you all for coming today," he began. "A year and a half ago, Amara and I stood at an altar, brought together by circumstances neither of us chose. Today we gather by choice to share two announcements with those closest to us." Amara stepped forward. "First, as some of you may have noticed," she gestured to her belly with a smile, "we're expanding our family. Our daughter will be joining us in about 4 months." Applause and congratulations filled the garden. Eleanor Stone wiped a tear from her eye, while William Johnson looked stunned but pleased. Even Richard Stone's stern expression softened momentarily at the news of a grandchild. "And second," Maxwell continued when the excitement had quieted, "we're establishing the Stone-Johnson Foundation, dedicated to developing and distributing assistive technologies to those who need them most, regardless of ability to pay." Amara took up the explanation. "This foundation fulfills the original vision of William Johnson Sr., who believed technology should improve lives across all socioeconomic levels. Half of the foundation's board will be people who personally use assistive technologies, ensuring that those we aim to serve have a voice in our direction." William Johnson stepped forward unexpectedly. "If I may," he said, his voice uncharacteristically emotional, "I would like to contribute personally to this foundation. My father's dream deserves to be fulfilled." Not to be outdone, Richard Stone cleared his throat. "Stone Industries, that is, the original company holdings not included in the merger, will match any contributions up to $50 million. Maxwell and Amara exchanged surprised glances. This unexpected support from both their fathers represented a healing that neither had fully anticipated. As the gathering continued, with guests mingling and discussing the announcements, Maxwell found a quiet moment with Amara near the garden's edge, overlooking the city that had been home to both their family businesses for generations. "Did you ever imagine this?" he asked, his arm around her waist, hand resting protectively over their unborn daughter. "That day at the altar, when you first saw me looking shocked at the sight of you, did you ever think we'd end up here?" Amara leaned into his embrace, remembering the fear and uncertainty of that day, the heavy veil, the whispered apology, the palpable tension. "Never," she admitted. "I was prepared for a lifetime of polite distance, of business partnership without personal connection. This, you, us, our baby, this is beyond anything I could have dreamed." Maxwell kissed her temple gently. "When I lifted your veil that day and saw your eyes, those beautiful, expressive eyes filled with apology for something that wasn't your fault, something shifted in me. Even through my anger at our parents, I sensed that you were different from what I'd been led to believe." "Different how?" Amara asked, curious about his perception of that moment that had changed both their lives. "Real," Maxwell said simply. "Not the perfect, polished projection our parents had tried to create, but a real person with depth and strength and vulnerability. It scared me then because I wasn't prepared for that reality. But now I know it was the beginning of seeing you, truly seeing you." Amara turned in his arms to face him fully. "And now?" "Now," Maxwell said, his voice filled with emotion, "I thank whatever twist of fate brought us together, however flawed the beginning. Because finding you, the real you, not the image our parents tried to construct, has been the greatest gift of my life." Their kiss, witnessed only by the setting sun and the city sprawled below them, sealed a journey that had begun in deception but flowered into the most authentic connection either had ever known. That night, as they lay together in their bedroom, Maxwell's hand resting on Amara's growing belly, he felt their daughter kick for the first time. The small movement, a new life announcing her presence, brought tears to his eyes. "She's strong," Amara murmured sleepily. "Like her father." "And brilliant," Maxwell added, "like her mother." "And loved," Amara said, covering his hand with her own. "Above all else, loved for exactly who she is, not for what anyone expects her to be." As Maxwell drifted toward sleep beside his wife, he reflected on the strange, winding path that had led them here. The arranged marriage that had seemed like a prison had become the doorway to the greatest freedom and joy he had ever known. The veil that had hidden Amara's true face had been lifted not just physically on their wedding day, but metaphorically over the months of their evolving relationship, revealing not an ugly bride, as his shallow first reaction had feared, but the most beautiful soul he had ever encountered. In the darkness of their bedroom, with the woman he loved beside him and their child growing beneath his palm, Maxwell Stone finally understood what his grandfather had meant in his letter about healing what had been broken. It wasn't just about business partnerships or family legacies. It was about seeing beyond appearances and arrangements to the authentic connections that truly mattered. 4 months later, Eleanor Rose Stone came into the world with her mother's expressive eyes and her father's determined chin. Named for both her grandmothers, she represented the union of two families that had once been divided but were now joined not just by business interests or societal arrangements, but by genuine love and shared purpose. As Maxwell held his newborn daughter while Amara rested, he made a silent promise to the tiny bundle in his arms. She would never know the weight of obligation without choice. She would be free to pursue her own path, to love whom she chose, to build a life based on her own values rather than inherited expectations. In that moment, the cycle of control and manipulation that had shaped both the Stone and Johnson families for generations was truly broken. What had begun as a billionaire's shock at his supposedly ugly bride had transformed into the most beautiful love story either Maxwell or Amara could have imagined. One built on seeing beyond appearances to the true beauty that lies within each human heart. And as Eleanor Rose wrapped her tiny fingers around her father's thumb, the future stretched before them all, bright, open, and full of possibilities limited only by love, which is to say, not limited at all.